This is the morning program with Liam Bartlett.
Yes, good morning, Perth, and wherever you're listening across Western Australia this morning, good to have you on board. Nice to have your company on this magnificent day. What another beautiful spring day we've turned out. 16 degrees at the moment. Rain on the way tomorrow. Apparently about to hit the Cape down in the southwest at around about 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, which means we may get the first little spots at around about 2 p.m. in the afternoon, according to the experts. Anyway, if you're out and about today, half your luck. 133 882 is our talkback number. Love to hear from you. 133 882. First up on the program today, the advice that is being given to WA's state government about how life might look in this state when 90% of us are vaccinated. Now, we've heard a lot about the modelling carried out by the Doherty Institute, the basis upon which the so-called National Exit Plan has been formulated. But we haven't been privy, really, to what the Health Department here in WA are being advised until now. University of WA Professor George Milne has been carrying out modelling for WA's pathway to living with COVID and presented it to health officials about 2 weeks ago. Contained in that modelling is a prediction that extended lockdown in WA is unavoidable, even with a 90% vaccination rate. Professor Milne joins us this morning. Professor, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. That may surprise many of us to hear, Professor, lockdowns even at 90%.
It's not as bad as it sounds there, Liam. In actual fact, we're talking of, yes, if we put lockdown in, it'll be a fairly moderate form of lockdown. So it still will allow many people to be back in the workplace, and importantly, it'll still allow schools to be open.
What do you mean by a moderate lockdown? What sort of thing are you basing that premise on?
The Melbourne outbreak last year went through 3 stages of lockdown, stage 2, 3 and 4. And 4 is what we would call hard lockdown. So our results suggest that we can get away without having to go into hard, sustained lockdown, but go into a milder form.
A milder form. So what? But people would still stay at home, would they?
Some people would. So it would allow a significant number of people to still be back in the workplace. It would still allow some community-wide contact, but not all. So there would be some restrictions. But it would be nothing as strict as we're seeing in Western Sydney at the moment.
Why does the modelling say that, Professor? Why does it say you still need lockdowns at 90% vaccination?
Because we've got the Delta variant, the Delta strain. So the previous work we did looked at the Alpha strain, which was less transmissible, but because Delta is much more transmissible than the original Wuhan strain and the Alpha strain, that means that the vaccination thresholds have to be much higher to protect the community. So we've been looking at vaccinating 70, 80, 90, 100% of the population, ages 12 and over, and also recently ages 5 and over.
Right, so when we say that 90%, that's 90% of all people over 12?
Exactly, yeah.
And what is the modelling saying then about deaths at 90% vaccination in WA?
Yeah, well, I've got the data in front of me here. It's saying that in an outbreak similar to the one in Sydney, without any lockdown in place, we'd have around about 200 deaths in Greater Perth. 200,
and is that annualised?
That would be during the lifetime of an outbreak, so that would be in over a six-month period.
6 months, okay, so that's worst case scenario. 200.
That's worst case scenario, and with the Delta strain, because it's got this high transmission rate, that too, is us calculating it on a worst case scenario.
Yes. So where is the threshold, Professor, under this modelling? I mean, where is that magical rate that contains any outbreak?
Well, the simple answer is it doesn't. It doesn't without the addition of some form of lockdown. We can do pretty well if we vaccinate. If we vaccinate ages 5 and over, as well as 12 and above, and if we can get up to around the high 80s, low 90s, 90% of coverage, the issue then is if there is an outbreak because of introduced cases, short and moderate lockdown we are showing will be highly effective. So this would be the moderate lockdown I just mentioned, and it would be for a fairly short period, 6 weeks at maximum. 6 weeks,
right?
Yeah,
right.
And I think that's we've modelled lots and lots of different scenarios, and I think with different vaccination rates, different ages vaccinated, and different forms of lockdown, and this is I think the best we can do in WA.
That's the best case scenario, really. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I got to ask you the question. Maybe it's not your field specifically, but is a 90% vaccination rate even possible?
I think public health personnel have told me that it's highly unlikely we could get up to that.
Highly unlikely?
We probably could get up into the high 80s. And that then becomes an issue of how do you make it easier for people to be vaccinated?
Yes.
Once we know that vaccination supply is going to increase significantly over the next 6 weeks, so there will hopefully be no shortage of vaccines. So the issue then is, can we get it out and distribute it much more widely than we're doing at present?
And Professor, can I ask you, how does this work? I mean, does the health department give you certain parameters? And then you frame the modelling around that, or do you create the scenario and just give the advice to the health department?
Well, we're doing, in a sense, independent research, our COVID modelling. This work's funded by the Department of Health's Future Health Research and Innovation Fund, and we're providing it on an as-needs basis to people in health if they wish it. But we're not contracted to provide them with this data, but we will make it available to them.
So when you gave these numbers to them, do they make any comment?
I think the understanding is that these are fairly plausible numbers.
Right, reasonable on both sides.
Reasonable, yes.
And does your modelling say anything about ICU beds and healthcare demand?
Well, we can do that. This was work we did. We did that work directly for health in early last year at the outset of the coronavirus. So we were working directly with them as part of their COVID-19 response team. But yes, the data we've got now gives us hospitalization rates, and we know that a certain percentage of hospitalizations will translate into ICU beds. We've used really good data that's come out of Public Health England over the last 6 weeks with the Delta variant to allow us to estimate from case numbers, hospitalizations and deaths. So that data also gives us a ratio of how many people in hospital end up in ICU. It's possibly about 10%, so even with the data we've got in front of us now,
yes,
we can estimate ICU demand. And I think, that's a good point, because the issue here is how can the health system cope if we get a burst of COVID-19 cases in WA?
Exactly. I must say, the 200 deaths as worst-case scenario over 6 months, that does strike me as a flu-like number, if I can put it that way.
It is a flu-like number, and And these are the numbers that we would have annually with flu. We didn't have these numbers last year because of the lockdown, so we didn't really have a flu season.
Yes.
Last year. So
exactly.
And you're absolutely right. These are around the same numbers.
But because I'm trying to, in amongst all this statistical analysis, I'm trying to sort of figure out where we come in with the clarion call for being able to live with the virus at some point. I think this probably answers the question.
I think that's right. I think, yes, we are going to have cases here. I still think even with high vaccination rates, there's still a role for a fairly short lockdown just to contain the growth rate of initial cases. And then we'll maybe get into some sort of, maybe 9 months' time, we'll get into some sort of steady state where we will have cases in the community. But hopefully they'll not be growing into a Sydney-like outbreak.
Because again, Professor, I mean, perhaps this is not really a question for you. It's starting to morph into politics, I think, political ramifications and decisions. But many people will say, well, if we still are having lockdowns of any description, even though they're moderate, as you say, what's the point of getting vaccinated? You will have a large part of the population asking that question.
Well, that's a communication issue in terms of public health. The scenario would be that if we didn't have vaccination, we'd be in a horrendous situation.
Yeah.
So we it's not just one or the other. We need high vaccination rates, really high vaccination rates, and we need to be prepared to put in short, maybe not too strict lockdown, but some sort of ability to cap the transmission.
Yes. Professor, thank you very much for your time this morning. Good to talk to you.
My pleasure.
Professor George Milne. Professor Milne is a UWA Professor of Computer Science. It's his team that carries out the modelling that's then delivered to the Health Department, and that modelling was delivered 2 weeks ago. Maybe that's the reason that Premier McGowan is often heard to talk about lockdowns still being in place, even with a 80 to 90% vaccination rate, as he puts it. What do you think of that? 133 882 is our talkback number. 19 past 9, our lines are open. We'll come back in a moment.
The morning program with Liam Bartlett on 882 6PR.
22 minutes past 9. Last week on the program, we talked about these new sunglasses from Facebook. New sunglasses done in conjunction with Ray-Ban, which are being released this week. And we had an interview about the actual product and took some of your calls, and we talked about some of the privacy concerns. Interesting follow-up, because the privacy, that's the National Privacy Watchdog, is now investigating whether or not Facebook's hidden camera sunglasses should be allowed to be sold in Australia. It's the Australian Information Commissioner and Privacy Commissioner, Angeline Falk, who was the top banana in that office. She's questioned the social media giant over whether it had conducted a privacy impact assessment, which I get as bureaucrat sort of speak for whether or not they've done their homework. Facebook so far haven't responded, but Ms. Falk said the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner was also working with international privacy regulators to assess the impact of the latest device, the sunglasses, and said all companies launching new technology products should take account of their privacy obligations. And she's worried about whether or not it will have a negative impact on Australians' privacy considerations. So there you go. So at least it's on their radar. Whether or not having a blue with Facebook at that level is ever going to end up with anything other than a Facebook victory is another story, but we'll wait and see. Interesting follow-up to that chat last week. Let's go back to the phones this morning. Hello, John.
Yeah, good day, Liam.
Hey.
I'm glad you brought up the bit about the flu and the similarities of the numbers, because you're one of the few journalists in Australia that actually questions this narrative. And I think everybody should be able to see clearly from what the professor said there with the numbers, then why are we looking at even lockdowns to start with? Because this is going to go from a pandemic to an endemic, is what it's doing in Europe.
Well, that's what you'd hope. Yeah, that's what you'd hope.
Well, I think it will, and some the cases here will go through the floor like they do. And people keep listening to these doomsday predictions where none of them have ever come true.
Well, I guess it shows you, though, doesn't it, where the foundations are for politicians then to be able to talk about lockdowns. And then, of course, from lockdowns you go to talk about travel restrictions and whether or not you can leave the country or the state or what have you, John. So it really is a domino effect.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's getting more draconian by the day in Australia. I think Australia's becoming a bit of a laughingstock overseas.
Thanks for your call this morning. Hello, Jason.
Yeah, good day, Liam. Yeah, if the Premier's listening to what that doc says or that professor, it's shut the gate on international travel there. It's shut the gate, mate. My partner, her kids are overseas, mate. It's just never going to happen. They're never going to be able to come here.
Well, I think what is going to be is clear as a bell from that modelling is that we will have to accept there are some deaths. And that's where I think there's a sort of a blockage, isn't there? Because the Premier keeps saying, well, you know, we don't want any deaths, but we're going to have some. And if we treat it like the flu, obviously there will be some. 200 according to the professor, and that's over a 6-month period. Do we have to change the psyche in order to push that button? But then again, he admits that 90% vaccination is very, very difficult to get to. So where does that leave us? It gets a bit depressing, I think.
It is, Liam.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. Hello, Murray.
Liam, word on the street is you're a pretty clever guy, and
the street can be
there's some
wrong.
very clever people out there. I'm fairly certain that for somebody to be able to discriminate against you whether you are or aren't vaccinated, and I'm vaccinated, so I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I'm pretty certain for someone to say you can't come into the football stadium or you can't go to a pub because you haven't been vaccinated, to me that's discrimination, and to me something like that is a law. Yeah. Our Constitution says laws must be presented to Parliament, must be debated in Parliament and must be voted on. And I don't think, or maybe Mr Quigley knows the answer to this, I don't think a Premier can just jump up and say, oh, well, from now on you can't go to the football if you're not vaccinated. I don't think it's right.
Well, you know, we've already seen employers backed by the federal government, Murray, saying, you know, we're going to make it mandatory. So SPC started it off, as you probably know, and then Qantas have jumped on the bandwagon. Crown are talking about it today. They're considering whether to make it mandatory, and they've got, 20,000 staff.
Is it legal?
Well, apparently, according to the legal advice, I've talked to John Hammond about this on the program during his segment, but we also spoke to another lawyer, and yeah, I mean, they're quite happy with it. The government's passed the other rules to give them indemnity against, any adverse reaction, $5,000 and upwards. They're happy with the legal position. I take your point on a moral issue, but gee, I don't fancy your chances of not being left out in the cold.
Well, here's something else, Liam. If you're a sex offender, you can freely go to a pub or go to the football, but if you haven't had a jab, you can't.
Yeah, if you put it like that, it doesn't sound too good, does it? Murray, I take your point. Others are welcome to phone in and give us their opinion. 133 882 is the number. 28 minutes past 9. News just into the program. This is very, very, it's important on two levels. Incredibly important given what we've just been talking about in terms of numbers, getting the vaccination rate in this state up to a reasonable level from where it is in the doldrums, but also on that subject of choice and democratic choice. A lot of our listeners will be very pleased to hear this. The Premier has just announced that from next Monday, all West Australians aged over 12 will be able to get a Pfizer vaccine at a state-run vaccination clinic. So that means finally, for all those listeners who have contacted the program, and there have been dozens of them, who are over 60 and want that choice between Pfizer and AstraZeneca, for whatever reason, you have now been listened to, and I guess a supply issue as well. The stocks are in, so you will now be able to have the jab the other way round. So just repeating that, from next Monday, the Premier says at all state-run vaccination clinics, anyone over the age of 12, it's 12 and up, will have the choice between Pfizer or AstraZeneca. Give us a ring. Has that made a difference to your decision to get vaccinated? 133 882 is the number, 29 past 9. 27 minutes to 10. Good to have your company here on 6PR. Morning program around Western Australia this morning. Nancy's on the line. Hello, Nancy.
Oh, hi, Liam. Love your show.
Thank you.
Liam, you know what annoys me more than anything? These over 60s who have refused to have the AstraZeneca don't know what they're really talking about. And I think the casino making everyone be jabbed is going to push these 60-year-olds, because that's the average age in the pool room, to go and have it. And I think it's a damn good thing. And I hope the casino goes ahead and does it, because nobody likes going in there knowing that 80% of the 60-year-olds who are in there refuse to have it.
You reckon Crown's decision, Crown might make a bigger impact on the vaccination rollout program than the choice between Pfizer and AstraZeneca, Nancy?
Yes, anybody, no one's going to do it better than Crown, because let me tell you, Liam, I go to the Crown. Okay, I'm admitting that. The average age in there is 60. Now, I'm in my 70s, right? I've actually had the AstraZeneca. A lot of my friends have refused to have the AstraZeneca or any jab for that matter, and they go to the Crown. And that annoys me, because I think to myself, if this virus comes here and these people haven't had it and I'm sitting next to them, what's going to happen?
Yeah, well, whatever makes a difference, whatever makes a positive difference, I think is a good thing. Thanks, Nancy. Hello, Craig.
How you going, Liam? Good show today. Just wanted to say, with the vaccine, even though you're vaccinated, you still catch COVID.
True.
So does that mean COVID is going to run rampant and we're going to have so many sick days that, everyone's going to be off work sick because they've got COVID?
Well, that's what the modelling's all about. I mean, that's what the modelling speaks to, 90% vaccination, you got 200 deaths in 6 months, and the odd lockdown that lasts for somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks, but a moderate lockdown, according to the professor. It's a hard one, Craig. I mean, we'll talk more about it a little bit later in the program. Phil is texting the show. He says, Liam, I'm over 60 and I'll go and get my vaccine next week now. So that's made the difference for Phil. I reckon it'll make a difference for a lot of people. Just repeating that news that the Premier has now said, that from next Monday in all state-run vaccination centres, everybody 12 and above, certainly those over 60, will now have a choice between Pfizer and AstraZeneca. 23 minutes to 10. I'll take some more of your calls on that shortly, but I just wanted to pop over to New York. I wanted to talk about this court case involving Prince Andrew, which started today, our time. Didn't last for very long because lawyers representing the Prince challenged the US court's jurisdiction in that civil lawsuit by the woman who's accusing him of sexually assaulting her 2 decades ago when she was 17. At a hearing at the US District Court in Manhattan, the Prince's lawyer questioned whether he was properly served with those papers over Virginia Giuffre's lawsuit. Now, that lawyer also said that Ms. Giuffre appeared to have signed away her right to sue the Queen's second son in resolving a separate lawsuit back in 2009. That may be a separate argument, but nevertheless, the next hearing before the judge will be in October. Justice Lewis Kaplan directed Ms. Giuffre's lawyer, David Boys, to propose alternative means to serve the papers on Prince Andrew. So that little battle will continue. But I wanted to talk about the role of David Boys, the so-called pitbull lawyer who is representing Virginia Giuffre's, because this, I think, is the most interesting part of the whole case. David Boys is about 80 years of age, one of the most celebrated litigators, in America. He's paid just under $2,500 an hour for his services. He represented, back in the old days, Al Gore, when he was formerly vice president, of course. He challenged the Hanging Chad's election. He's represented Harvey Weinstein, been a good mate of Harvey Weinstein's for a long time, and also represented Elizabeth Holmes. In fact, ended up on the board of Theranos, the collapsed biotech company. And this, in legal circles in Manhattan, has been described as his last chance to rewrite the final chapter of his career. We're joined this morning by Professor Stephen Gillies from New York University's School of Law. Professor Gillies, good morning. Good evening your time.
Good morning.
What can you tell us about David Boies? He sounds like he really has been well and truly a high flyer.
Oh, very much so. He's extremely prominent, a very good trial lawyer. He's not someone you want to see on the other side. He's not someone you want to face as a witness in cross-examination. He can instill terror in his opponents, and it was a good choice to pick him for this case.
And even though I just mentioned his incredible fee, Professor, it seems that David Boies is doing this pro bono, representing Virginia Giuffre. I wonder why that is.
Well, you know, David Boies does not need money. What he needs is vindication for some of his more questionable representations. He also feels passionately about the case and the issues, and saw this case as a vehicle to achieve multiple objectives.
There is an exquisite irony, isn't there, that the man who represented Harvey Weinstein for so long is now representing a victim.
It is ironic, and I think David Boies sees this as a way of making amends for his Weinstein work.
And in terms of the Theranos chapter of his life, I mean, you look back at that now, it's easy with hindsight, I suppose, but you think, how did somebody supposedly so smart get involved in something like that at that level?
Well, he's not a chemist, he's not a doctor, and Holmes seems to have, or claimed she had, developed a blood testing manner that would be less intrusive than current. He might have believed it, and he wasn't the only one. You know, former secretaries of state and others also showed up on her board.
That's true, and that case is just starting in your country. But on Prince Andrew's situation, I mean, does this mean that the papers will have to be served on him personally, do you think?
Oh, no. Prince Andrew cannot hide. The clock is ticking. And if Judge Kaplan concludes that he is evading service, which would not be hard given his security detail, the judge will find some alternate means of effecting service other than personal delivery of the papers. This can't go on. This won't go on. And really the crunch will come when Prince Andrew has to decide whether or not to appear or to default and take a judgment against him. And then when the Giuffre team decides how to prove damages and whether Prince Andrew will challenge her claim of damages, that's where the action will be, not over the surface.
It boggles my mind, the sort of division here geographically as well. You know, how does a U.S. District Court in Manhattan enforce these sorts of things on the second son of a queen who is hiding away in Balmoral?
Because he came to the United States and he allegedly committed certain acts in New York City. You can't come into the country, do things that may be actionable, and run back home and claim that you're immune to answering a complaint. So he chose to come here, and that made all the difference.
Do you think that, and some people have postulated in recent weeks that they may try, I beg your pardon, down the track to pull some sort of diplomatic immunity status. Do you think anything like that would work potentially?
You know, the facts are not well enough developed. The complaint against Prince Andrew tries to address that question by saying what is charged against him had no relationship to any diplomatic portfolio he may have had, and that seems to be true. So I think they may try that, but I doubt it will succeed.
All right. Well, we'll wait for David Boies to get on his feet again come October. That will be a very, very interesting theatre, if nothing else.
Yes, it will. The whole event will be great theatre.
Professor, thanks for your time this morning.
Okay, good. Take care.
Professor Stephen Gillis from New York University's School of Law. 17 minutes to 10 on the morning program. Back in a sec. 14 minutes away from 10 this morning. Just reiterating that earlier announcement from the Premier about the vaccinations in WA. As far as we know at this stage, the vaccination choice. So from next Monday, anybody aged over 12 in WA will be able to get a vaccination, either the Pfizer or the AstraZeneca. So you will be able to have your choice. So those over 60 will not be locked in any longer as from next Monday, but only at the state-run vaccination clinics. So not the GP clinics that have been rolling it out in the selected pharmacies. Only, as far as we know, at the state-run vaccination clinics. If that information changes, we'll let you know. Talking about vaccinations today, gee whiz, lockdowns and potential modelling. Some text messages to the program. Sarah says, Liam, ask the professor, what does their modelling say about suicides and mental health impact of lockdowns? Yep, that's a good point. I haven't seen any of that sort of modelling around, Sarah. This one from John. John says, sorry, Liam, the professor didn't convince me at all. Sounded like it looks, to be honest, like it's being made up as we go. Modelling is and never has been an exact science, says John. It's in its basic form, guesswork. That's a bit harsh. Statistical modelling, I think, is certainly a science, John. But Joe's on your side, John. He says, because modelling has been so accurate in predicting climate change. Okay. Stephen says, Liam, hello, there are enough vaccines already, but people have made their decision. We're a victim of our own success. And Scott says, can we compare the professor's figures with past figures for the flu, says Scott. We did make that point, Scott, in the interview. Those figures, the death figures, are very, very similar to a flu season as far as Western Australia is concerned. But while we're talking about getting a vaccination, I tell you what, never mind about the mandatory or non-mandatory choice. The place to be to get a vaccination is to be working in local government in the southwest of this state. If you're a worker at the Shire of Manjimup, you are in Clover. That's the place, that's the best, most profitable place to be to get vaccinated anywhere in Western Australia. The Shire of Manjimup is offering one-off payments, $300 to $500 for its 127 full-time staff if they're vaccinated before February. Now, apparently the amount paid depends on how long they've been employed and how many hours they work each week. Joining us is the president of that shire, Paul Omaday, and, of course, former local government minister, former WA Liberal leader. How are you this morning, Paul?
Good, Lam. Good, thanks very much.
Have you been vaccinated?
Yes, all of the councillors have been vaccinated, yep.
What is, I know, I've always known there's been something in the water down there at Manji and Pemberton, but there's got to be something in the air as well, because you've gone completely mad, have you?
No, well, you're right. It is a pretty special place. That's why lots of people like to visit. But look, the thing, it's interesting, Liam, because I'm up for election and there's been a little bit of a twist that the CEO advised the council that he was going to implement this incentive. Of course, we would all prefer that people would vaccinate without an incentive, but there were funds available in the wages budget that were for incentives. We're about to change from the federal award to a state industrial relations award. We're not too happy about that, but the funds were there, and he came up with the idea of giving this incentive. Being a former environmental health officer.
What's his middle name? Santa Claus? The CEO. I mean, why doesn't he say, when you say the funds are available, Paul, come on, this is local government. You've had experience at the top in both forms of government, two strands. Why doesn't he just hand the money back to the ratepayers?
Well, the other thing is that he could have just done it without telling the council about it, and we wouldn't have been the wiser. As you'd be aware, running the council, the operational side, the paying the staff is a CEO responsibility. We appoint the CEO, but then he runs the council. So,
yes.
As a former environmental health officer, he's very worried about COVID. He believes it will come, and we've got a shire with 4 towns and 7 settlements, with all the recreation facilities and swimming pools and all of those kinds of things that need to be managed. So he believes that by giving the incentive, he'll get a bigger number. Now, It'll be further discussed at the next council meeting, but I doubt if he'll change his mind.
Well, he could have just made it mandatory, like Qantas have done or SPC have done. Why give each worker $500? $500.
Look, I think we're pretty blasé about this COVID, Liam, but when the borders finally open up, even if we've got 80% vaccinated, the COVID will come in here, and lockdowns and all those kinds of things. You know, the same guy, by the way, has been the fellow who got a $420,000 grant from lotteries to help out families that were at risk of families suffering as a result of COVID.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that. That's probably part of his job description, to actually help the community. You know, that's what he's paid for. But we come back to ratepayers, Paul. Ratepayers.
Yeah,
Roads, rates, and rubbish.
No, we're more than that, and everybody knows that.
Well, clearly, you're a charity.
No. Look, he is tasked as the CEO to identify risks associated with the management of our local government and to mitigate those risks. So this is his way of doing that. So what are you suggesting, that we should reverse that decision?
Oh, without doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you give a worker $500 to get vaccinated? If it is so important, as you say, and I don't disagree with your premise, but what's happened to community responsibility? Everyone else in WA has to get it done for responsibility.
I agree with you 100%, and I think everybody should vaccinate themselves. But in this case, if we have COVID and we have people that are away on sick, we then have to replace those people in those jobs. So they're on sick leave. We then have to, there's a double whammy as far as keeping the local government going. Who's going to clean the toilets, all those. So this is really an innovative way of approaching it. I don't necessarily agree with the CEO, but we appoint him to do a job. Look, he also managed to attract a vaccination centre to manage uptown, operating out of the town hall. So a lot of people, you've got to weigh it up in the end, Liam. And yes, I would like to see them all vaccinate themselves, but he's made a proposition now that he's putting in place, and are we, the local government, going to reverse that decision? Hey, I'm the one up for election.
Yeah,
I'm copying it chapter and verse at the moment, and I can do without it.
I can believe it, but you always front up. That's what I love about you. Thanks very much for your time this morning.
No worries, ma'am. Anytime.
Paul Omaday, President of the Shire of Manjimup. What do you think? 133 882 is the number. 133 882. $500 to get vaccinated. 7 minutes to 11. Have we gone mad in local government? Ian, good morning.
Yes, good morning. I'm still laughing about what your offsider called you, the big dog. I love it.
What a name and a resignation.
No, I don't know, but all I want to know is don't bark, and whatever you do, don't bite me. Look, a quick one. I was most impressed with the Premier, although I'm not a Premier voter, but I was most impressed this morning that he's going to allow my wife and I, and we're both septuagenarians, the choice of being able to have the Pfizer vaccine.
So did that make a difference for you, Ian?
Oh, it sure does. Well, look, we shouldn't be, but we are a little bit timid when it comes to the AZ, only because of what could possibly happen. And we've never won the lottery, but you just never know.
Oh, yeah, no.
And we thought if we had the choice, and I think that I almost speak for a lot of people my age that who haven't been vaccinated. They're probably a bit jittery about the AZ anyway. But it's wonderful news, really good news. So,
Good on you. All right, well, you're off next week. That's good. Yeah, good on you, Ian. Thank you. Hello, Gary.
G'day, Liam. I'm looking forward to another private detective story when you can arrange it. One that we actually find the result from. On a serious note, the Premier's modelling of his 90% vaccination rate.
Yep.
What happens? I mean, I think that fellow you had on, the professor, summed up. I don't think we're going to get to that. And I think in New South Wales it's dropping off now. So where does that leave the Premier with his 90%?
It's a great question. Where does that leave any of us? No, I thought that was probably the most interesting comment. I mean, the professor admitted that it's probably almost impossible to get to, and so if the modelling's based on that, where does that leave us, Gary?
Yeah, thanks. It's something we just live in hope for, don't we?
Yeah, we do, mate. We do. Everything crossed. Thanks for your call this morning. 4 minutes to 10 on the morning program. Gemma Tognini, good morning.
Hello.
I think you can get those short skirts at Ross's.
At Ross's auctions?
Yeah, I think you can.
I've actually never been, but I'm told that one can buy whatever one
Wants.
On
that auction site.
I really like that song. I was at the gym on Sunday morning. See how I just dropped that in because I'm super noble.
Yeah. Little bit of virtue signalling there.
Didn't tell you I ate 1 trillion calories on Sunday afternoon though. But
that's good. You should have thrown that in first.
You got to eat. Like every now and again, I'm pretty disciplined with my food. I have to be because I don't have the kind of metabolism that just goes whatever. If I genuinely... Festively Plump is a suburb that I have inhabited in my life.
1 hour of ice cream, 2 hours of gym.
That's it. Yeah. So, but every now and again I'm like, hand me the chips and the sour cream.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to give in.
Sometimes you simply need, like, the metabolism wants what the metabolism wants.
Hey, listen, I know you want to talk about a couple of things today, but just quickly, before we go any further.
Sure.
We tragically, in the early hours of this morning, we lost a very good listener.
Yeah, we did.
To this program and a person that you spent a lot of time with growing up.
Yeah, Ronnie, big Ronnie. Ronnie's gone to heaven and he loved this show. And he just kind of want to protect his privacy. He would be stoked about this just quietly. He said one of the last things he said. I mean, I've shared with you. No, I've shared for you guys who are listening. I have, hand on my heart, I've shared with Liam some things that he asked me to pass on the weekend, and they were typical Ron. But I tell you, you just, and those who are silly enough to join me on social media, and some of you read the piece I wrote in the weekend paper, but all we have is time, Liam. If ever I needed a reminder that all we have is time, I mean, the last things he was talking about was the things that matter, wanting extra time with his children and his grandchildren and his wife. And you sort of walk away and think, how many people are denied that? And needlessly, I would say needlessly, particularly now, 18 months down the road in this pandemic, we've got vaccines, we've got therapeutics, not just vaccines, we've got therapeutics. And look, listen, there's a grand final that's going to take place in WA in 2 weeks, and I think that's spectacular for WA. I think it's bloody brilliant, fantastic, probably the first and last time it'll happen. Yep. But please don't tell me that we can make exceptions for football players, AFL entourage, you name it, to come into WA and quarantine, but we will not make exceptions for family members. Please, someone explain to me why that is.
Well, it's illogical.
It is illogical. It's indefensible. And I was thinking this morning, a mate of mine has 5 children, which, look, personally, I think is too many. But anyway, they're lovely kids. They don't live here, so they won't be listening. But she always said to me, I let my kids make decisions for the things that they can take responsibility for. So when they were little, it was things like, do you want to wear a red T-shirt? Do you want to wear a blue T-shirt? Do you want to have orange juice or apple juice? That kind of thing. And we have got this, pardon my French, this bloody medical governing body, and they're mostly public servants who haven't seen a patient in their lifetime or the last 20 years, who are saying to people like you and me, your family can't come. They can't spend 2 weeks quarantine in WA if there has to be media outrage for someone to come and spend time with a dying relative. It is insane. It is morally indefensible. And I swear, I just, after the last week, I mean, everybody knows I lost my dad. That was 2 years ago, and I still miss him. And I remember, after he passed away, I would have given anything for just one more conversation.
Yeah, well, those are the important things, aren't they?
It's the difference between living and existing.
I take it on that level, then. I take it you're not going to the grand final.
I got offered a chance to go to the grand final. I turned it down.
Got offered tickets?
I got offered the barcode, remember?
Yeah.
And
you said no?
I said no. Passed it on to someone else who was happy to have it. Just a personal decision, I think.
But you like your footy?
Love my footy. Love Collingwood, but they've broken my heart again.
Yeah, well, you can't hold that against you.
Well, I have my own teeth. Yeah. I've never been to jail, so...
Well, you'll never get to be a Category 1 member.
That's right.
But you're not going?
No, not going to go. And it was the same with... I've got a couple of friends, one friend that was offered tickets.
So based on that principle?
Based on that... bloody oath. Okay. Pardon my French. I'm a bit tired. It's
no, that's all right. You just think it's a double standard if you go.
How would I be sitting here talking about this sort of thing and then going and enjoy? Like, I'd like to think, Liam, I'm a fundamentally flawed human, right? But I've got principles, and I'd rather think that I've got principles than just being populism. If you want to go to the grand final, knock yourself out, have a great day. I think it's wonderful for WA, but I cannot go in good conscience knowing that there are people separated from their families while this carries on.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. 12 minutes past 10 with Gemma Tonieni. If you'd like to join in the conversation, 133 882. Mark's on the line. Good day, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Oh, hey, Gemma. Hey, Liam. Yeah, look, I was just listening to that. That was, I'm on the same page as you, Gemma, on that one as well. I think it's strange, and I just don't think you're capable of making your own healthcare decisions at the moment. That's the crux of it. So, but that wasn't really the reason for my call. I was just ringing about the Manjimup Shire conversation that was had before the break, and I was just jaw-dropping at the contempt that was being shown for ratepayers in that discussion. It might not be the president's fault, and he's probably right. It's up to the Shire as to how to spend their money, but the contempt that they're showing on, I need to spend my budget, what can I potentially spend it on?
Yeah.
Is absolutely disgusting. And I think that is unfortunately going to be a cancer now that's going to rife its way through every single LGA in Western Australia who's going to jump on that now and think that's their entitlement to do for their ratepayers' funds. I think it's a poor decision, and it needs to be called out, significantly called out amongst all the populace, because council elections are happening now. Councillors need to know that it is about spending their ratepayers' money effectively, and what they don't spend should be either saved for the next year,
Agreed.
or should be returned back to ratepayers. It's insane, and I just don't think it's justified.
Mark,
I agree. I'd agree.
Your call is the sort of call that keeps me going on this program.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
It's actually people with sanity in the world.
Can I make somewhat of a trite observation? I don't think that I would dare say there'd be a high level. I might be wrong, but a strong degree of vaccine resistance in Manjimup.
Do you reckon?
Oh,
in that Shire?
No, well, just in the down south. It's a bit hippy-dippy, isn't it?
Well, it's only the staff. It's 127 staff. Oh, you think it's got the sort of whole Nimbin principle going on?
I just think
That's got nothing to do with it,
I
though.
think it's madness. Mark is 1,000% right. It is madness.
So this is part of the empire building that goes on at local government. It shouldn't be any part of local government.
Did you see this week Albo was interviewed in the Oz, and his one of his plans is for National Cabinet to bring local government into National Cabinet? I mean, do you want to just may as well line yourself up against the wall at dawn and press fire yourself?
Yeah.
Seriously.
That's about right. Mark, thank you for your call.
Hello, Mark.
Hello, Roger.
Hello, good morning to both of you.
Hello.
I just want to go back to your comments about the inequity of football versus family members for people dying and sick and whatever. You called it illogical and indefensible. Indefensible, yes, but illogical as far as the Premier is concerned, no. There's votes and popularity. If you've got a populist Premier and, this is a captain's call premiership government, I should say, going on here.
Yeah.
In the same way as I have criticised people who called for Cook's resignation in regard to the health department. I'm no supporter of Cook as an individual, but, my point is all of these things sit squarely at the feet of Mark McGowan. It's a captain's call government, and you can't run a captain's call government without taking the responsibility for the decisions that are made. Thank you.
It's a really good call, and it speaks.
Thanks, Roger.
It speaks to Gareth's column. What was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago? It was like he's been in power for 4.5 years. Is he responsible for actually anything?
No, it's always someone else's fault.
Totally.
Yeah.
The ceiling falls down in Royal Perth ED department yesterday. Whose fault was that? Gladys's fault as well?
No, that was a good look, wasn't it?
Oh,
For a state,
show us your surplus, mate.
State with $5.6 billion up your sleeve.
I mean, if I don't pay my mortgage, is that a surplus? Can we talk about that?
One of the doctors had to have stitches.
I mean, imagine it's the ED, right? Imagine if it was an elderly patient. Imagine if it was a critically ill patient. And as you quite rightly said, one doctor needed stitches because the bloody ceiling fell down.
Well, have you taken a walk around Royal Perth lately?
Yeah.
I tell you what, it hasn't changed much since you were about 6 months old.
That's right.
In nappies.
I was a delightful baby.
You were a child prodigy. John. John, good morning.
There you go there, bro. Look, I've got a sort of a thing about the women with those burqas that over in Afghanistan on TV last night. Oh, it's disgraceful. As far as the human race, it's disgraceful. And these men have done some horrible things to these women. I think the women should take off all their gear around the world and say, "Well, stuff you. We're not fed up with you."
I reckon, John, the sad reality is if they did that in Afghanistan, they would pretty soon find themselves on the end of a bullet.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's the problem. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you, but this is the collapse of Afghanistan. Women and the entire joint is cooked, but women and children particularly.
We have seen tiny snippets on the news, John, of that sort of pushback from some women's groups and young kids.
Incredibly brave.
And street protests. I mean, I can't believe how brave they are.
Yeah. It's nothing.
It's incredible. It's almost, they are literally putting their life on the line doing that.
100%. It's like women in Iran who take off their hijab, and they're dancing and they're arrested for dancing in the street. And we in this country talk about things that are, allegedly brave.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I can't believe it either. John, thanks for your call this morning. 133 882. If you'd like to have a chat to Gemma, it's 17 past 10.
Until midday, this is the morning program with Liam Bartlett.
21 minutes past 10 with Gemma Tognini in the PC Free Zone.
I love that sting.
It's good, isn't it?
Bit of ABBA.
A bit of ABBA, yeah. You can never go. What do you think of the new ones?
Oh, I listen so you don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty sad. It's like, don't go there. Like the reboots are never good.
I thought that was all right.
The reboot of Will and Grace, terrible. The reboot of Gilmore Girls, terrible.
Yeah, but ABBA, the song,
they sounded the same, but
they were pretty much.
But also, do you know what the thing that's worse is they're both blonde now.
Gee.
Anna and Frida are both blonde.
Well, great.
It's not right.
Grey,
speaking as someone
blonde.
who is not a natural blonde and goes blonde to hide the obvious.
Silvery blonde.
I feel like that was I'm pretty disappointed.
Swedish thing to do, isn't it?
Changes everything.
Gee, that's a bit tough.
Uh-huh.
All right, Peter's on the line. Hello, Pete.
G'day, Liam. G'day, Gemma.
Hello, Pete.
How you going? Look, you talk about the vaccine and you've talked about the football and people coming from interstate. I'd like to make a prediction that on Tuesday after the football, we have Mr. Mark McGowan safety and we'll cook up a COVID case and we'll all be in a lockdown on Tuesday night.
What makes you say that, Pete?
It's called keeping it safe, and they don't know if someone's brought one here or not, so they'll just put us into lockdown just to be on the safe side.
So your trust of this government is at such a level that you think that they would, and for the record, I don't think this.
You're a cynical man.
You think that they would make up a COVID case to lock us all up to cover their backsides?
Too right.
Wow.
Gee, Peter.
Wow.
That
trust is fleeting.
That's,
Always said it.
That's sub-basement. That's right down.
Yeah.
That's right down the bottom. Oh, gee. Ross, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Mentioned Collingwood before. I'm not a Collingwood supporter or an Eddie fan, but Eddie was denied entry into WA just so Mark McGowan could show off and pretend he's tough.
Totally.
But right now we've got Brian Taylor and James Brayshaw in a private house quarantining so they can go outside, fresh air, all sorts of stuff, not even hotel quarantining.
Yeah.
They're allowed in, as are a whole heap of other Melbourne journalists.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's
why
my point.
are they getting preferential treatment that they don't have to go to hotel quarantine?
Well, ask the Premier. He's running the joint.
Yeah, well, that's exactly Gemma's point on exemptions,
Right. And if you, that's, I think the whole thing about Eddie Maguire was stupid. It was just so petty and so small, so small. But not, like to your point, Liam, it is exactly what I'm talking about. If there are if there are sports journos quarantining in a private home right now, please tell me why your family, my friend's family are told they can't come here and quarantine at all. It is a disgrace. And I think once we're past this madness, and look, I'm old, you're old. Sorry, you and I are both old. We've been around, sorry to drag you down with me.
Thanks, Gemma, yeah.
We've been around long enough to know this stuff always ends the way it ends, right?
Yeah.
When this passes, How many people will be able to put their hand up and go, I actually am proud of how I behaved. I didn't buy into this. I actually spoke up for people who needed to be spoken up for.
Tell you what's feeling like a long time before it passes. I can tell
well, you
that.
know what? The slower the warm-up, the harder the impact.
Oh.
You can quote me on that.
Haven't heard that before.
I know, I just made it up. Sorry for that person who doesn't like my cackle. That was a proper cackle. I had a coffee before I came in.
You're on fire
today.
today.
Oh, look, I'm on the hard waters.
You're on fire. That's amazing. Robert's on the line. Hello, Robert.
Yeah, how you going?
Hello, mate.
Love your show, guys. I've got a quick thing with you, Sue. You're the most sensible people I hear on here. But Liam, you've been all around the world investigating. Are you not cynical about the vaccines or anything at all? Nothing.
You got.
Do you believe everything is happening completely and utterly 100%?
Oh, well, no, depends on which part of it you're talking about, Robert. Without drilling down on, I'm not a fan of conspiracy theories. Full stop. No matter what they are, because they always rely too much on too many people being too smart.
And they are not often.
One thing I know from my experience is there's very few smart people in one room, even though all of them will tell you they are. So I sort of rule that out. But you've got to trust the science at some point. I think the origins of the virus are still the most intriguing aspect of the whole thing.
Agreed. And Sherry Markson's done some amazing work on that. Like, Robert, I understand where Robert's coming from, because I think the conversation around the vaccine started off on the wrong foot, and I think it was coercive, and I think it was they didn't make space for everyday people to ask questions. And for what it's worth, I wouldn't normally, who cares about what medical choices I make? But I'm due for my second microchip on Thursday, and if it doesn't allow me to order Uber Eats from my left arm, I'll be well annoyed. Yeah. But my point is that it took me a year. It took me a year to decide that I was comfortable with it, and that I felt that was the right decision for my health, and I would take responsibility for that decision. The coercive nature of the conversation pushes people to places where it's easier to believe that they're sinister. But if Robert's also talking about Crown and their decision, like, I personally think vaccine passports are a disgrace.
What if they make it mandatory?
I won't go. I'll vote with my feet. It's one thing for a private organisation, right, to say, and this is Crown's decision, a private organisation like Qantas or any other airline to say, to fly on my aeroplane, you are required to do this. This is my business. We are making that decision. That gives people a choice to go, right, I'm going with that airline, or I'm actually going to go with that airline. It's a whole other step in the wrong direction for a government to mandate these sorts of things. We've just seen in the last week the UK's ditched it. We've just seen in the last week Denmark ditched it. And do you know what I reckon? In Australia, there was a comment that I think it was correct me if I'm wrong, it was the Home Office Minister in the UK. They said something along the lines of, we had to look at it, but ultimately we were very uncomfortable with the concept of saying to people, can we see your papers? Just to go to a bar or to go and engage in society. And I reckon Australians, historically, we haven't had that kind of history. Europe saw that kind of culture and that kind of history.
But is the public health imperative more important? Because, well,
we have to pick a horse and ride it, right? So if you're uncomfortable going out in public at 70% vaccination, then stay home, because you're not fit for functional society. Never get in a car, never have a glass of wine.
Yeah.
That's my view. And if a restaurant down the road wants to say you can't come unless you're vaccinated, more power to them. It's their restaurant.
But, they've been doing that in Europe and lots of European countries and throughout New York. We just had a chat with Craig Gabriel just the other day. In Manhattan, you couldn't get into a cafe in Manhattan without having, proof of vaccination. It seemed to be working perfectly.
I saw a contrary story this morning online about restaurants reporting a 25% drop in revenue.
Well, because people weren't going in.
Because they weren't going in. And I think that my point is, let the market decide. Don't let the government decide. Do you stop people from going? Do you stop people from going?
Is it a commercial aspect, or is it just a straight public health issue?
I think it's not that simple, because if we go public health, right, then you're playing into the hands of the Luddites who go, we literally cannot leave the house unless 100% of people are vaccinated and no one else dies of COVID. You can die of anything you want. You can die of loneliness. You can die of a misdiagnosed or an undiagnosed illness. You can die from missing your treatments for cancer. You can die of any other thing. You can die of self-harm. You cannot die from COVID. And that's the only logical, end to that sort of conversation. But again, Liam, do you go to the to go to a restaurant and does a cafe owner say to you, have you got your measles pass?
No, but we wouldn't say that. We don't. Well,
it's just as virulent.
We don't put a group of kids into daycare without everyone having whooping cough.
Yeah, I know, but they go to primary school without being vaccinated. Plenty of them do.
Well,
I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying they do it.
Okay.
We're trying to make it black and white. It's not black and white.
It's not black and white. This program is never black and white.
and for the record, like yes. I'm half jabbed. I'll be fully jabbed from Thursday.
You know, let's finish on this because it's not black and white. But
it's not.
But you're a Collingwood supporter.
I am.
Which is black and white.
My heart's been broken again. My old man loved Bucks. I don't know why. I don't know why. I thought he was a terrible coach, but he loved him. Yeah, he knows more about footy than I ever
He's
did.
Gone now.
Gone.
G-A-W-N, gone. Who's going to be playing next week at the stadium? Gemma, thanks very much.
Thank you, mate.
Gemma Tognini on the PC Free Zone. It's just gone 10:30.
The morning program with Liam Bartlett on 882 6PR.
25 minutes to 11. Nice to have your company this morning on this Tuesday in Western Australia. Magnificent day in Perth. 20 degrees at the moment, heading for a top of 22, and the rain on the way sometime early tomorrow afternoon. I wanted to talk today about the story behind the story, I suppose. Certainly the story behind the pictures that we've been seeing on the news. Last night, you may have seen those quite extensive coverage of the Foreign Minister, Maurice Payne, and Defence Minister Peter Dutton travelling together, a little bit of a joint ticket around to some of our Asian neighbours on what the government is loosely referring to as a security cooperation tour. They were in, I think yesterday, South Korea. A couple of days before that, visiting our Indonesian neighbours. And of course, the whole thing is part of this Quad group, where the Prime Minister will eventually, along with Japan and India, will go across to the United States next week and meet Joe Biden at the White House and, in fact, give an address, all leaders of the Quad giving an address to the United Nations during that trip. The interesting thing for me, though, in the wake of that, a former diplomat, a bloke who knows a few things about intergovernment relations and how people talk to each other on these matters, has written a very interesting piece about the fact that we, Australia that is, have been used again by America, this time specifically in relation to our relationship with our Indonesian neighbours. I'm talking about Bruce Haig, who is a veteran Australian foreign diplomat and political commentator. He's worked extensively in South Africa, in Pakistan, Afghanistan and Sri Lanka, and he joins us on the program this morning. How are you, Bruce?
Oh, good. Thanks, Liam. Nice to hear your voice.
Yeah, good to catch up with you. I'm fascinated by this analysis because I think you're very much on the money here, but it's not a view that is often shared. When you see those pictures of Peter Dutton and Maurice Payne talking to our neighbours, what have you been thinking the last couple of days?
Yeah, well, we've been set up for this by the United States with their stalking horse to go and put this message, this anti-China message. And the Indonesians, of course, have their own relationship with China. They've got big Belt and Road projects, and they've worked out a relationship with China. It's not an easy relationship for the Indonesians, but they've worked it out. And they, of course, their real politic tells them that China is the biggest power in the region, and they have to get along with them. They don't think that the Americans will necessarily back them in whatever disputes they may have. And they've developed very good relations with Singapore and Malaysia, so they've got a good relationships within the region. We, on the other hand, are running this anti-China thing for first of all for Trump and now for Biden, and there's nothing in it for Australia. Absolutely nothing. We've been to India on the same visit, and then to South Korea. South Koreans were very circumspect, and the Indians offered nothing except joint exercises in the Indian Ocean, which is nothing. I mean, it's not anywhere that China's really going to confront anybody. So, if we have any business with Indonesia, it's in terms of COVID and helping Indonesia in the crisis that they are currently going through, and talking about trade and perhaps tourism with respect to Bali. And there's a lot that needs to be a lot of assistance that could be between Australia and Indonesia that could occur. So we've actually gone against our own interests, and we've come away with nothing. The Indonesians, of course, didn't want to knock the visit back, but they've come out with platitudes, and they've said, one of the things they've said is that they may engage in defence exercises onshore in Australia in the future, but the emphasis is on may. So really we're damaging ourselves all the time with this whole running with America, and Afghanistan should have shown us that we need to start looking out for ourselves and coming to the realisation there's a lot of things about China that are a worry. Taiwan, Uyghurs, Tibet, and just the way China conducts itself internally. There's a lot of concern there, but they are the biggest power in the region, and we have to learn to get along with them, and that's what diplomacy at the end of the day should all be about.
So one of the things that fascinates me, Bruce, Indonesia, like us, is a major trading partner of China. I mean, it's heavily dependent on China for trade. So obviously, it's got a lot of skin in the game. But we have a state like Victoria where the federal government says, for better or worse, okay, you're not dealing with China, tear up your Belt and Road Initiative. We don't want you to have any part of that. And yet Indonesia has a huge, as you've just alluded to, Belt and Road deal with China. But we go to Indonesia and we make anti-Chinese noise, but we also say, look, what about doing joint military exercises? It doesn't seem to be consistent. It doesn't make sense to me.
No, it doesn't gel at all, Liam. You're quite right. And one of the exercises that we could get involved in is with patrolling the waters between the Philippines and Indonesia and Malaysia in terms of the transit of Islamic terrorists between those three countries. And I've suggested in the past that that's something that would be constructive and something useful to all countries if Australia carried out, in concert with Singapore and Malaysia and Indonesia, and the Philippines, such patrols, which is it's in our national interest, but it's certainly in their national interests as well. But in terms of trade, the Indonesians, of course, are a trading nation. We have made statements which the Chinese objected to. We tried to push it in their face after Morrison had that conversation with Trump. It backfired, and we lost a lot of trade. But the Americans behind our backs have picked up 40% of that trade. So they're very cynical. They'll use us, and unfortunately, we've allowed ourselves to be used for no gain.
What about the language, Bruce? That's something you know a lot about in diplomatic circles. As a complete layperson observer, I find the language that Defence Minister Dutton uses overly harsh and unnecessary. But am I over-egging the pud there, or
No, you're correct, and it's unnecessary again. And another thing that he did was to make a very anti-China statement from Indonesia, from Jakarta. That's just really bad manners, bad diplomacy. You don't criticise another country from when you're in as a guest of a country, as he was with Indonesia, particularly given that Indonesia has this difficult relationship with China, which they're trying to nurture for their own advantage. For him to come in and expect that Indonesia will back his statements about China was naive, and it was bad-mannered. And, of course, as you know, face is everything. That's why the Chinese got so angry with Morrison. Face is hugely important, and particularly in Indonesia, Indonesians, the Javanese in particular, can be very sensitive in that regard, and you've got to be alert to that and aware of that.
Well, the Defence Minister called the Chinese, during that Indonesian meeting, he called the Chinese coercive, harbouring a zero-sum mentality, aggressive and bellicose. Now, I completely get that you don't take a step backward. I'm not saying for 1 second. I'm not suggesting that we to use a very a street expression, suck up to the Chinese. Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. We stand our ground, and we are our own people and exercise that sovereignty when we need to. But if you don't have to, why poke the bear like that?
Exactly. That's the point. And look, there's so many advantages for Australia to remain engaged with China. Students is one, tourism is another, but the Chinese people are terrific, as you know, and we should be engaging with these people-to-people links. We all got governments that aren't perfect, and Xi Jinping is anything but perfect, and there's a lot of things that we could go into it at much greater length. That, in fact, what he's doing is to make things more difficult for the Chinese people rather than easier. But, we need, because we've got 1 million people of Chinese who either have Chinese relatives or call China their original home in Australia, and there's no reason why that shouldn't grow to our advantage. But, to close off all these avenues and using this sort of bellicose language, as you say, it doesn't gain anything. It's a very, it causes us loss. And that, as I see, looking at the national interest, that's not very smart.
What did you think of the comments from the old recalcitrant, the former Malaysian Prime Minister, Mahathir Mohamad, on the same day that we were meeting in Jakarta? I thought that was a little bit scary.
Well, he's 96 and he was on the money. And it's not just him. The Singapore Prime Minister, when Morrison was going through to the G7 in Cornwall, said the same thing. They're trying to help us. They're trying to say, listen, back off. We all understand what China's like, what it's doing, all of us. But let's just, notch it down, and let's all within this region act together. But Australia is acting on behalf of the United States. And look, I think my opinion is that the American alliance is Australia's Maginot Line. It's not worth much when push comes to shove.
Yeah, that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, as old as Mahathir is, he has amazing connections, amazing contacts, Bruce.
Yes.
And when he says that we are needlessly risking our security with the standoff with China, I just wonder where that's really coming from.
Look, there's a lot of scenarios, Liam, that you can paint. One is that if America pushes China too hard, and if we're the yapping dog at America's side, they may say, look, we're sick of this. We want America to pull back, and we want Australia out of this. They won't target Pine Gap, but they could target Tyndall Air Force Base, and I don't think that would trigger an American response. If they targeted Pine Gap, yes, the Americans would seek to take out Chinese communications, but not Tyndall, and there's other bases in Townsville that are within range of China that they could target. Now, these are terrible, terrible scenarios, and we should never have put ourselves in that position. But, that's what Mahathir is trying to say. Look after yourselves. Stop thinking that you can get out in front and that America is at your back, because it's not necessarily so. And I certainly don't think, after the experiences I've had over my lifetime with DFAT, that the Americans will. When it came to East Timor, and we wanted the Americans to back us into East Timor, they wouldn't. They stood a cruiser offshore, and that was it.
Yeah, that's it. I remember that well. And you've had a lot of experience, as I say, Bruce. Geez, it's a long way since those times when you worked as a jackaroo in the Northwest.
But I'd love to go back. I'd love to go back through the Kimberleys again and have a look. Yeah,
beautiful part of the world, isn't it? Hey, Bruce,
it's great.
Thanks very much for having a chat to us. I really appreciate your time.
Yes, and nice to hear from you. Thanks, Liam.
Bruce Haig, a veteran Australian diplomat, joined the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs way back in 1972. Been around a long time. He served in South Africa 1976 to 79 with the Australian Embassy, which is now the High Commission, as well as serving in Afghanistan, Indonesia, Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Sri Lanka. And knows a few things about doublespeak too, and the art of diplomacy. 12 minutes to 11 on the morning program. Back in a sec. 9 minutes to 11 on the morning program this Tuesday morning. Let's go back to the phones this morning. Hello, John.
G'day, Liam. How are you, mate?
I'm
Look,
all right.
Liam, you struck gold twice today. that Scottish professor you had on about the COVID, mate, he was wonderful to hear him. Now, this chappie Bruce, can you ask him to bring back my songbook? Because everything he said, we've been saying it all along exactly the way he's put it. Now, if the average Australian, Liam, doesn't have the IQ at all to see that Bruce, this gentleman Bruce Haig, mate, what he said was to the letter. Now, if people think that, you know, guys like this make this up, they don't. He knows exactly what's going on. Now, the only way, Liam, you're going to get change, you've got to make change, you've got to get rid of this bloody Liberal government. Now, you've got those two turkeys running around Indonesia, wherever they're going, making more enemies. Now, the reason we're in this position, Liam, is because we've cut our own backsides. What we've done, we've burnt all our bridges. Now we've got to go back and try and suck up to everybody to back us up.
Well,
and Bruce Haig said exactly what would happen. The Americans are just using us up. Every time we lose a market from China, the Americans come in and gobble it up.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? You would hate to think that there's any purposeful action on their behalf, not when they're also saying they're such a valuable partner. It's not what you do as a decent partner. Thanks, John, for your call. Hello, Rhonda.
Oh, hi, Liam.
Hi, Rhonda. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a bit nervous. I've been wanting to do this for weeks and weeks, but, yeah.
Oh, don't worry about that. I'm always nervous when I talk on the radio anyway, so that's 3 hours a day, so you can be quite comfortable.
Well, I listen to you every day, Liam. Look, I'm very concerned that nobody's considering the people like me who can't have this vaccination for medical reasons. There is nobody considering the anxiousness and the scariness that we are feeling. Like I went to my doctor's last week because I was so anxious with all the things that we're not going to be able to do and people thinking that we're terrible because we don't have this. So I just needed to bring it to your attention, if I can.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the GP tells you, your GP tells you, you can't have it no matter what, whichever vaccine.
Well, the COVID people told me that.
Oh, I see.
When the vaccinations all started to roll out, I rang the vaccination, the people in the COVID thing that I've got in my app.
Yeah.
And they told me that there was no way I could have these vaccinations.
Right.
I went to my doctor last week and he checked it out and he told me the same. And then I saw him last week and he said that he was going to try and speak to somebody in authority to try to find out if there any of the other ones that are coming out or coming through I might be able to
have
take.
Yeah.
But he doesn't think maybe so.
But in the meantime, of course, if you're excluded because of medical reasons, then what do you do if they introduce a vaccine passport, et cetera, et cetera? So that's interesting, Rhonda. I've never heard anyone actually say in a position of authority exactly what they have planned. If I suppose that will come if they have a so-called passport, or you'll have to prove that you've had the vaccination, or in your case not because of medical conditions. But I'll tell you what, we can put in a call. It is a very good question. Let's put in a call to the health department and ask them if there is a public position right now on what people can do if challenged in that way. If they have a medical condition, do they have to keep a letter from their GP or something in their purse or whatever that is, which will, constitute a passport in that sense? I'll just I'll put you back to Carolee and Andrew, and we'll make a call for you and see if we can get an answer on that before midday, before we finish on air today. Thanks very much for calling in.
The morning program with Liam Bartlett on 882 6PR.
Well, as the saying goes, never judge a book by its cover, but it seems we're all pretty guilty of that here in Australia. Yes, according to new research released today, I'm talking about ageism. And, I'm all for saying that 40 is the new 20, 60 is the new 40. I love that. But there is some very serious research released today by the Australian Human Rights Commission confirming that a whopping 90% of us agree that ageism exists. Not only does it exist, that ageism is a real problem affecting people of all ages. Joining us is the Australian Human Rights Commissioner, Dr. Kay Patterson. Dr. Patterson, good morning.
Good morning, Liam.
I suppose this sort of confirms our worst fears, doesn't it? Especially those who are older, but not mentioning any names this morning, of course.
No, we won't mention names.
No. But I think some of this is very interesting, Doctor. I mean, 83% agree that ageism is a problem, 65% saying it affects people of all ages. That's perhaps the most surprising. What do you think?
I think that people thought, if they thought about ageism, it was about older people, and they didn't realise that across all age groups, ageism has an effect. It's different for different age groups, but people have stereotypes and views about particular age groups.
Exactly. And if I can come to that straight away, your research says young adults, which are classed as 18 to 39, are most likely to experience ageism as being condescended to or ignored, particularly at work. Now I had to read that again, that age category, 18 to 39. Really?
Well, what we did was when we took the 2,440 people we surveyed, we asked them what did they think was young, what did they think was middle-aged, and what did they think was old. And 18 to 39 was the averages given by the survey respondents. 40 to 62 was middle-aged, and 62 plus was older age. Now, different people might put them in different classes, but that's what we used. All this data is about what these people thought, what generally Australians think. So, people might say, well, I don't fit into that, or I wouldn't have said that. But this is what we haven't interpreted it. We've just said, here are the facts.
Yep.
And 18 to 39-year-olds and people, all of the age groups said that really the most likely experience they'd have is being condescended to, particularly at work, for example, you're inexperienced, or you can't be a leader or a manager because you haven't got enough experience or you're too young. Now, I was just reading a book about a ship that came out with people on from southern Scotland, actually, in the 1800s, with 800 souls on board. The captain of that ship was 30 years of age. I'm not sure we'd appoint a 30-year-old to captain a ship with 800 souls on board now. So, really and honestly, we do actually sometimes condescend to younger people. And then in the same way, we've got data in another research that shows that a significant number of companies have an age above which they won't employ people, and that's 50. And then older people have people saying, oh, Mum, we'll look after your finances now, or, this house is really too big for you. So they start, giving you help you don't really want.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? I think the hidden stuff, too, is sort of the most sinister. I mean, you mentioned companies, they're not employing people over a certain age. Sometimes those policies are hidden, aren't they? Because under the Equal Opportunity Act, it's against the law to ask someone in a job interview how old you are.
Under the Age Discrimination Act, it's against the law to discriminate against someone on the basis of age. But the problem is, it's often he said, she said. I knew as soon as I walked in and he saw my grey hair that they lost interest in me. Well, you can make a complaint to the Commission, and sometimes when they're called in for a conciliation, they realise that they've been ageist in their way of employing people. But I think they lose out because, we know that multi-generational workforces work very well. And what you do is you capture the enthusiasm and of the young person, you capture the experience and wisdom of an older person. And I think smart firms don't adhere to that, you're not going to employ somebody over 50.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, look, you've been on both sides of the fence. You were a senator for many, many years. Kay, I mean, the experience that you've had on the political side of life, and now your experience behind the desk, as a commissioner, I mean, you can't buy that sort of experience, can you? I know it's an old cliche, but you can't buy certain things associated with the years on the ground.
Well, and before I was a senator, I was teaching health science students for 11 years, and they were going to be physios and occupational therapists. I thought, they're doing all this stuff on child development. They're mainly going to be working with older people. So in the late 70s, I started to get interested in gerontology, which is a study of ageing.
Yeah.
and, pursued that in America and pursued that and developed courses in Australia. That's what led me into the Senate. So it's really been a passion of mine since I was, in my early 30s, when the baby boom was never going to get old. But it's really important that we take the value of each age group and appreciate it. Now, one of the other things is there are sort of stereotypes about ages which people should do things by. You should have had a family, you should have got married by this age, you should have done this. And what we've found is that's all got out of kilter, that the stereotypes don't fit what's really happening. People are staying at home longer. They're taking longer to get into, if they can, into a house. They're taking longer, and maybe they change jobs more often. But those stereotypes are held when they're really out of date. So that was another interesting finding in the research.
And look, part of the reason they're stereotypes is because they still happen. And so what can we actually do about it? I mean, how do we change that mindset?
Well, one of the things that we found in the study was when we asked people, how many of you had friends outside of your age group, the ones that were least judgmental about that age group were the ones who'd experienced it. So the more you get exposed to younger people, the more accepting you are and the more understanding you are. Vice versa, a young person being exposed to an older person is more accepting and more and more understanding of the things that they have faced in their life and they're now facing, maybe illness or trying to pay a mortgage off when you're older. So I think exposing each generation to the other generation is really important, and all the evidence shows that that's one of the ways of breaking down ageism between the generations. The other thing is that, if you read the press, you'd think there was enormous antagonism between the generations, and we found that despite that there was a bit of tension, there was general agreement that each age group had to face its own problems, and young people didn't think that older people had left the country of this world worse than they found it. I think it was 70%. I just can't remember the figure offhand. I think 70% didn't think that. So there is a warmth between the generations that's not really reflected in the media.
Yeah, no, we always bang on about, the younger generation being critical and saying, hey, boomer, and the boomers being critical of millennials and et cetera, et cetera.
Well, it's not as antagonistic as I think we'd make out. And that's the good news from the research, but there's also the news that ageism does affect everybody, but particularly, for example, ageism at its extreme can lead to elder abuse, and people taking over control of someone's life when they don't want it.
Yeah.
When they can well look after themselves in terms of their financial affairs or whether they downsize.
That's the nastier side, isn't it? The sinister side.
That's the end side of, and the nasty side of ageism, or where young people begin to lose confidence because they're told, you haven't got the experience, you're not good enough for this job. You get just the same, sometimes the same. I suppose people live up to the expectations, and what we've got to do is to say it's not about age, it's about ageism, and that's the problem.
Yeah. Well, we'll get some feedback from our listeners. Thank you very much for your time today, Kay. Really appreciate it. Good to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Are you having talk back? Because I'll stay on and listen if you are.
Oh, okay. I'll put you back to Carolee. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Dr. Kay Patterson, Age Discrimination Commissioner. Give us a call if ageism has been a problem for you, 133 882. Have you experienced it over time? I mean, when I was young, I used to think old people were stupid, and now I love old people. That's called self-interest. But what do you think? 133 882. I'm only kidding. 16 past 11. Give us a buzz. Let's go to some calls now, James. Ben's on the line. Hello, Ben.
Hi, how are you, Liam?
Good, mate. What's happening?
Yeah, well, good. This hasn't happened yet, but I'm 55 years old, and I'm changing careers after 20 years in the mining industry as an operator, and I want to move into recruitment labour hire. Now, I've only been doing this for about a week and a half, and what I was doing before I worked at mining is to sell. So I cold called into a couple of recruitment companies, dressed up formally with a tie and all that, and covered my hair, whatever. My CV, never put my date of birth or my age on my CV. I've also applied for a internal job with my current employer. I've got an interview next week with a recruitment company for another company. I've also had one interview with a recruitment company up in Perth. And look, they never asked me my age.
Ah.
The thing is that you have to be able to sell yourself. It's sort of recruitment in WA is, if you've been working in the mining industry, you've got that sort of background, so you can probably screen people. But I'm 55. I've never worked as a recruiter or anything, but I've had experience in the past with recruiting. So I haven't got a job yet, but maybe I should call you in about a month's time and let you know how I'm getting on.
Yeah, no, I'd like to hear that. So you've purposefully taken your date of birth off your CV?
Yeah, I'll include 2 photos of myself there so they can see.
Yeah.
I had one company up in, this is only at the end of last week, one company up in Perth called me and said, we know you're senior. Is the drop in pay okay? And are you prepared to move to the CBD and all that?
Yeah.
So, put photos on there, say yourself. None of them have asked me my age.
That's really interesting. So you put the emphasis on your experience straight away instead of the age.
Yeah, and I think if they do ask you, just say, look, I can't tell you my age, but I'll give you, at least 10 years, maybe more service, that sort of thing. Because I've been with my current employer for 16 years.
Yeah.
And I don't think they'll complain because if you're older, Liam, and you want to change careers or jobs, now is definitely the time to do it because our economy is booming and there's no labour coming in. So they're screaming out for everyone.
It's the way to go. But, it's sort of counterintuitive, isn't it? Because in the mining industry, you'd think that sort of experience would count for everything and age would not be an issue. But you never know. I mean, it's the complete opposite of it. It's a text from Andrew to the program says, I'm 23. I'm trying to get my first rental, but I feel my age is deterring my applications from being considered. And I guess that's a story that a lot of people in their early 20s, especially in this market for rentals, I mean, that's just so competitive at the moment. People would rather have, older people leasing their home or what have you. I mean, we hear quite a few stories about that. If you've got a story that you'd like to share, 133 882 is our number, 133 882. We have to take a break. We'll come back in a sec. 22 minutes past 11, 21 degrees in the city at the moment, almost at that expected high of 22 today. 133 882 is our talkback number. Hello, Dylan.
G'day, Liam. How you going, mate?
Good morning.
Yeah, and to you. My daughter a couple of years ago, when she was 19 and talking about moving out, my wife said, look, why don't you buy your place? Don't worry about renting.
Yeah.
Which she did. At 20, she bought her first place, a little villa, which was run down, and she got her initial mortgage through Keystart, just like me and my wife did, and a lot of people out there did. Now,
good idea.
A year into that, she was able to, at the stage where she could get out of it and refinance with a major bank and get a lot lower interest rate. And the first bank she went to, which is the bank that me and my wife have had our mortgage with for a long time, were not helpful at all. They kept asking her questions like, just little things like, so you're only 20 years old, or did your parents give the house to you? And are you paying your own mortgage? Which she is, and she's got money in the bank. She's very thrifty with money and got a good job. And this is a bank that's supposed to be community-minded, and they just gave her the runaround and did absolutely nothing. And then she ended up going to one of the big 4 banks, and they couldn't have been more than helpful.
Yeah.
So I can't work it out. Yeah.
Probably just totally based on that sort of youthful appearance and presentation, and they just think, are they really responsible, or is she really across everything?
Well, Liam, the only debt she had and has ever had in her life is the mortgage she's got with her place now.
Yeah.
And she actually pays, and it just nothing added up. She never been late with a bill, always paid. She was ahead on her mortgage. Her house was, because she spent money in her place, the house was worth a lot more than it was. And this bank I just don't get it, So reward someone for being, responsible. Again, elderly people, reward them for their experience as well.
Totally. Yeah, totally. The other way too. You got to be careful, don't you, with how people present. You got to look behind the facade, Dylan. And age is a big one.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks very
much.
much.
Keep up good work, mate.
Good on you. Thanks for calling in. Hello, Will.
Good morning. Hey, mate, just to follow on from that the older fellow that applied for a job, always applying for jobs. I recently applied for a job at the age of 72 and landed it, a great job.
What, full-time, Will, or part-time?
Sort of full-time casual, I think it's referred to.
Okay.
As I certainly work a lot of hours, but I presented my age up front, everything up front, and it was quite evident when they went through my, record,
Yeah.
my age, but I sold myself on my fitness and my experience and that sort of thing, and the fact that I'm sober and don't smoke, and I reckon they looked at that as much as, anything else.
Yeah, you're sober and you don't smoke. Well, you must be an angel.
I'm boring, that's what I am.
Hey, Will, how come do you have to work financially, or at 72 you just...
No, I've tried retirement several times, and it's, I think you retire, you die, don't you?
That's what they say, yeah.
Yeah, so, no, I don't like that option, so this one's better.
Oh, good on you. Good on you. Well, yeah. I think it's a terrific idea to, if you can employ people like yourself with all that experience and, I mean, to use the old... it's a cliche, I suppose, the steady Freddy sort of approach, I think, older women too. I mean, it's just really, you get a really comfortable feeling in the workplace, stability.
Well, when I had my own business, in the end, I looked for grey power to employ because they were reliable. They always get there early.
That's it.
They're the last to leave, and they never walk around without something in their hand. They don't sort of walk back from the job empty-handed.
Yep. And you can still share bad jokes with them as well.
Yeah, I'm full of them.
Yes. Thanks very much, Will. Good on you. Graham, good morning.
Good morning, William. How are you, mate?
Good, thank you. What's happening?
What's happening? Talking about discrimination in the seniors. I'm 74, retired electrical contractor.
Yeah.
I gave my business over to my nephew to run. So I wanted to transfer things from one bank to another. I wanted to get a credit card with Bank West, which I've got most of my accounts now, change it from ANZ. And I wanted to just get a normal Visa credit card with them. Would not give it to me.
Wouldn't let you have one?
Wouldn't let me have one.
Why not?
Well, the thing was I had an American Express credit card that I want to keep. And I've got over 15 grand in credit with it because I used to use that for travel overseas where I was working. But I don't own anybody a house. I own the house. I own over certain things. But because I won't get rid of that $17,000 credit card, they won't give me just a normal Visa.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. Because they deem that you're potentially...
That if I bank out the American Express, that they'll be with their credit card that they might be up the creek.
Yeah,
I can't understand that.
Mm.
I own my own dwelling. I own certain things in property. I owe 100 times more than 17 or 15 grand.
Yeah.
But the computer says no, you can't have it.
Yeah, well, probably because they can't link the credit card back to the house or the assets, the physical assets, But yeah, it does. That's bizarre, though, Graham, isn't it? On the face of it, especially when you see some of the people who are offered credit cards unsolicited still these days, even though the rules have changed slightly. You used to be able to get those free offers in the mail every third day. But no, good story. Thanks very much for that. 28 minutes past 11. Speaking of banks, swimming with sharks has proven very popular, but what about swimming with the crocs? The Swim with Salties experience, I kid you not, is opening today at Wildlife Habitat in Port Douglas. Moments ago, the first swimmers hopped in the water with the crocs. Claire Anderson is Wildlife Habitat General Manager and joins us on the program. Claire, hi, how are you?
Hello, I'm very, very well.
Still in one piece, I take it.
I am absolutely well and truly intact.
Claire, in terms of safety, now, there's a mention of a clear screen somewhere separating the swimmers from the crocodile. Tell me it's very thick and very stable.
I can assure you it is very secure. It is 8 centimetres of plastic, basically, of Perspex. And I tell you what, when you are in that pool looking at that crocodile, you feel like you could literally touch him.
It must be a mistake, but it says here that bookings have been very popular already.
Look, we have had a lot of interest from the get-go. Word was out. We weren't even open, and we were getting a lot of interest interstate. Of course, all the lockdowns have subsequently occurred, and things are certainly not as good as we'd like them to be now.
No, I can appreciate that, but it'll get better, Claire. It'll get better.
It will.
But, how big are the salties that we're talking about on the other side of the screen?
So we've got two fairly impressive salties. They're both about 4.5 metres in length.
Wow.
We've got Digger and we've got Big Owl, and they're really absolutely impressive animals.
Digger and Big Owl.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at that length, that girth, they're pretty powerful, as you know. I mean, you're not sort of worried about them knocking the screen over or jumping?
No. The safety aspect of it, obviously, it's all been engineered to ensure that our guests are absolutely safe and that our crocs stay where they're meant to stay. So, no, in terms of its integrity, the safety aspect is certainly not on the crocodiles coming into the swimming area. So our swimmers are 100% safe.
How did you come up with this? I mean, I know the swimming with sharks thing's been around for a long time, but it's a little bit different, isn't it? Because you do it in a cage, and that's sort of you either jump into the cage or it's lowered in the water or whatever. It's a bit different.
It is. That is absolutely true. So this has been a brainchild of the late Charlie Woodward for about 6 years now, and it's changed it's evolved, if you like, over the last 6 years to what we have today, which is a multi-million-dollar facility. It is an amazing experience, the only one of its kind anywhere on the eastern seaboard. A really exciting time for us to be showcasing crocodiles eyeball to eyeball.
That's amazing. How much are the tickets, Claire?
So $199, and that includes our admission to the park, which is also a 5-day entry. So it's a once in a lifetime experience. We all talk about never swim with a crocodile, stay away from the water's edge, and here we're absolutely turning that on its head and saying, well, actually, now you can get in the water and be eyeball to eyeball.
Yeah, look, full marks for kudos to you, for ingenuity and creativity, but I think I'll take a pass on it. But Claire, can I just say, I don't know whether you've heard this before, but I'll do it anyway. I hope the tickets all get snapped up.
Thank you so much. We really look forward to seeing people back in the region.
Good on you, Claire. Nice to talk to you this morning.
Thank you very much.
Claire Anderson. Oh, dear. Nothing like a good dad joke combined with a croc story. That's what I say. That's ageism for you. There you go. Combining one with the other. 133 882 is our talkback number. 28 minutes to midday.
The morning program stock market report.
Owen Clare joins us from Value Stockbroking. Owen, good morning. An update from Westpac and Wesfarmers all in the one day.
Yeah, a little bit of an update today from Westpac. Not particularly important to the share price, but the regulators have blocked Westpac's sale of their business in PNG to the ASX-listed Kina Bank, who are actually based in Papua New Guinea. Westpac wants to focus on banking in just Australia and New Zealand. So back in December last year, they arranged to sell both their Fijian and Papua New Guinean operations for $420 million to Kina Bank. But the PNG regulators today have said that they think that will lessen competition in PNG, so they won't let Kina Bank go ahead with the PNG transaction, although nothing has been said about that Fijian business, although the news really hasn't hurt Westpac's share price, even though there's $420 million involved. Their shares today are steady at $25.64. It has been bad news for Kina Bank, though. Their shares on the ASX have lost as much as 10% today. Currently, they're down 3 cents at 87 cents. They have traded as low as 80.5. Kina have already bought ANZ's retail banking operation in Papua New Guinea back in 2009.